Manny Diaz is set to start his first year as the Duke football head coach. He's already got one spring football season in the books. What did we learn? What can we expect out of this group going into the new season?
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is J.J. Jackson. Thanks for being with us here today on Thursday, May 9th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop to discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We talk a lot about Duke men's basketball. A lot of people love the Brotherhood program, and we certainly do ourselves. But today, we're going to be talking about Duke football under first-year head coach Manny Diaz with this Duke program by way of Penn State as their defensive coordinator, a couple of seasons in the ACC as a head coach already at Miami. He's got a spring football season in the books. So before it gets too far removed from spring, let's recap it all with our good pal, Josh Cox, who is a compadre with the Section 17 podcast. We'll discuss all of that throughout the course of our show here today. And then don't worry, we'll get back into the basketball conversations in the days to come as we're still in limbo trying to figure out who's going to be that next transfer portal addition for Jon Scheyer's team. All right, so without further ado, very excited to bring him on in. It's Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. Please make sure that you follow this Locked On Blue Devils podcast for free wherever it is that you get it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, share it with your friends. If you're listening on the podcast platform, give us a 5-star rating and written review. But Josh is here. Josh, we hope that you're doing well, my friend.
Yeah, doing great. JJ, thanks for having me back on. And this time talking a little pigskin.
Yeah, never a bad day to talk a little Duke football. As again, I was just telling you, we don't want to get too far removed from the spring football season. There is such an emphasis out there in terms of following the Duke basketball roster once the season came to a close, and we're getting NBA draft declarations and Duke having way more players enter the transfer portal than they did after Jon Scheyer's first season. Got kind of swallowed up in all of that. And meanwhile, Manny Diaz is completing his first season as the Duke football coach. So really wanted to pivot over there and have a football discussion with you today, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, much like basketball, 2 years ago we did not see many football players enter the portal, and times are a-changing, as they say. And football has seen 18 players, 17 off of last year's roster, 18 total enter the portal. And so we're playing that game of filling those roster spots, and similar to basketball on the same side of football, kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern, a waiting game on those next guys to commit. So both programs have a similar mindset right now as far as the fan base goes.
Excited to talk about this Duke football team as they've got a new head coach in Manny Diaz, who's taken over after 2 seasons that we had with Mike Elko before he took the Texas A&M head coaching job. Diaz, of course, has been in head coach in this league over at Miami before. Back on December 9th of 2023, following the end of the season, there was a press conference where Manny Diaz was introduced as the Duke football coach. It took a little bit for people to get used to saying that Manny Diaz, Duke football head coach. Does he feel like he's kind of adjusted to being in this new spot now that a spring season is completed in the books? Like, are we ready for this, man?
Yeah, I mean, it was obvious just the way that the timing of everything. He kept his distance during bowl season and let Trooper, as the interim head coach, Trooper Taylor, lead this program during that time. He was somewhat around, but not really, and then bowl season hits, and then the players are able to go home because they're on Christmas break, right? See their families. And so then when they come back, there's very limited, due to NCAA rules and restrictions, there's limited access that the head coaches and those coordinators and position coaches can have with these players. Plus, January is a huge recruiting month. And so those guys are out and about and just trying to figure it out. I mean, Manny's trying to hire a staff, making sure he's got everybody. You know what I mean? There's all this going on. And so, Coach Diaz really, when this spring practice hit, early in March, I mean, that was really when he actually got to sit down with his team. I mean, and so you can imagine everybody's brand new. Everything is brand new. Everybody's getting adjusted to different styles of leadership and different players' leadership. You lose a vocal leader for, 5 years really in Dwayne Carter, Mr. Duke, the mayor, or whatever you want to call him. But he was a very vocal leader. And then, you don't have anybody that has his personality. I don't know anybody that does, right? And so you're replacing a little bit of that leadership on the defensive side of the football. And then, it's well known, Riley Leonard transferring to Notre Dame, and Jalen Calhoun graduating, and Jordan Waters transferring, and all of these types of things is just kind of a new day. The offensive line, Graham Barton, Jacob Monk off to the NFL. And so there's a lot of question marks. And so Manny was meeting a new team as a new head coach with a new coaching staff. And so to answer the question, does Manny feel at home yet? I'd say he does now because spring practice was great. He was able to really dig his feet in there with those guys, spend the amount of time. But I would say those first 2 months, he probably struggled to feel like anything just because he was trying to get it, adjusted and hire his staff, recruit, and not make any NCAA violations, right? So that really muddied the waters.
I think settling in is the best way to describe what I'm looking for here. And what you talked about there towards the end, putting a coaching staff together is a big challenge for anybody. And when you're settling in, and as he talked about, as he was introduced back in early December, that's one of the first things that needs to happen. Yes, you want to recruit players. You want to keep them on your team and not enter the transfer portal and not have so much turnover, but also bring in new players and that sort of thing. You got to recruit guys, and they need to understand who it is that's going to be coaching their position groups, who are going to be the coordinators, all of those things. So I guess starting with the coordinators, how does this come together? How does Manny Diaz start to settle in with the new staff that he put together?
Yeah, he goes out and grabs two Jonathans, Jonathan Patke from UTSA, defensive coordinator. I don't believe, and I could be, I would stand corrected if possible, if need be, but I don't believe those two guys necessarily have worked together before. The rest of Manny's staff, I believe there's some connection. Either they coached together or they were at the same place together at the same time and paths crossed. But Patke brings an aggressive defense. The thing that attracted Coach Diaz to Coach Patke was that both of Penn State and UTSA last year were in the top fill in the blank at takeaways and that ratio of turnovers, and very aggressive on defense, and really have the mindset of the more times we take the ball away from the opposing team's offense, the better off we are. And so I believe their philosophies matched and lined up. And so that was part of the reason for that hire. And then on the offensive side of the football, you have Jonathan Brewer, who Coach Diaz did know at Miami, but Brewer's really a Rhett Lashley guy. SMU, we all know SMU. If you think SMU, you think offense, right? You think scoring a lot of points, and you think putting the ball in your playmakers' hands. You think speed, getting as many snaps as possible. Those are all things that Coach Brewer is bringing to Duke. This season, they just passed this legislation for the NCAA football just a couple of weeks ago, that there will be in-ear communication between the offensive coordinator and the quarterback. That's going to speed things up even more. And so you're going to see a little bit of a different vibe this year from the Duke offense. And so those are the two coordinator hires. Brewer's a young guy, really connects well. And then Patke as well, young guy. And so both of those guys are finding their voices and will be taking the helm, of ACC caliber offense and defense. And so all good. And so far so good with those two guys.
All right, so we've got the coaching staff starting to fill out. It's the first spring for Manny Diaz, and you're taking a look at what this roster can look like. And with any big roster, it starts with that quarterback position. A new man on campus, we've talked about him a lot, Malik Murphy. We'll talk about his spring and a little bit more after we take our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today, brought to you by Yahoo Finance. That's right. When we talk about Yahoo Finance, of course, we're talking about more than 25 years of experience being the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one spot. The number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. It's the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Back on Locked On Blue Devils here today, JJ Jackson, hanging out with Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. So we're talking about this football team. Manny Diaz, mid to early December, announced as the new football coach. About a month later, 3 weeks, there's a commitment. About officially a month later, we're able to sign a letter of intent and add a new quarterback to Duke University. That's Malik Murphy by way of Texas. That's a pretty big addition to this program, Josh.
Yes, the verbal commitment was the morning of the bowl game. I remember that vividly because he had given the yes to the coaching staff, and I was around Coach Diaz that morning, and he was like, man, it'd be great if he would get that post up because then it would give people, in the bowl game something to talk about as well. And sure enough, it happened. And so, yeah, Malik Murphy transfers in from Texas where he was the number 2 quarterback. And that's notable simply because the third string quarterback at Texas was none other than Arch Manning. And so obviously the coaching staff at Texas deemed that he outplayed him for that QB2 spot. Played a couple of games, started a couple of games for Texas this past season. Got wins in both of those games, I believe. I'm not sure about that, but I believe they were both wins. And right off the bat, what you see with Malik Murphy is, first of all, his physical gifting. He looks like a linebacker or a defensive end. He's 6'5", pushing 250. I mean, he's a big, big boy. But his arm, just the speed in which he can throw a football is pretty incredible. And so obvious reasons, why Coach Diaz went after a quarterback. Duke fans, are smart enough to understand last season we needed 3 quarterbacks to get through that season. And so rightfully so, going after a quarterback and landed one, a highly rated one that I believe is going to really help Duke win some football games.
I think so too. I think it's a massive addition for this program. You mentioned playing for Texas, and you mentioned that quarterback room, right? Arch Manning was the third string. Quinn Ewers, who many expect to be a high draft pick whenever he declares to go to the league, is the starter for the Longhorns. It's just a Texas team that went to the college football playoff. Only 4 teams, of course, last season, the last season that we had that 4-team CFP edition. So a really good Texas team, and this is a guy who's out there able to play on the offense for the Longhorns. Steve Sarkisian and his staff trusting Malik Murphy to get the job done there. So really big get. But getting him is one thing. Then it turns over to, okay, what is this guy like in the building? What is he like on the practice field? What is he like actually competing as an everyday starter? As we go through the course of the spring, how was Malik received? And more importantly, how comfortable did Malik look and how did he play?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the young man is an extremely well-spoken, respectful guy. I watched him interact with some former Duke football players that are, in their 60s and 70s. I've seen him interact with kids. I've seen him interact with families. So number one, he's a good person, right? Like, he's a good kid. And then secondly, he has natural leadership qualities. So one of the spring practices that I was at, he threw a pass over the middle. Wide receiver ended up getting hit pretty, obviously a spring ball, so they're not getting nailed hard, but got hit coming across. And he dropped the football or whatever. And Malik was the first person to run straight to that wide receiver and apologize for putting him in that situation. Like, that's my bad. I will never do that again. There have been times where receivers drop passes and Malik is the first one over there to encourage them or to talk to them or to lead them. So I believe he's a natural born leader there. An obvious thing is, people know he was highly recruited in the transfer portal. We live in the day and age with the transfer portal and NIL. And so I'm sure that, there's been some, just like in an NFL locker room, you know what I mean? You have a Russell Wilson or somebody, come in with a big contract, or even a Baker Mayfield, show up and so there's going to be some adjustment there, because these guys are highly touted. These guys do have strong leadership abilities. And so certainly, you have your quarterback room that features, a true sophomore in Grayson Loftus, who won several ACC football games last season, who proved that he belonged and that he could win games. And so, I believe that their relationship grew over the spring into a great friendship, competitive. I do not believe at all that Coach Diaz has just already made up his mind to hand over the keys to Malik Murphy. I do believe this is a quarterback battle. If you watched the spring game, you saw, quite frankly, Grayson Loftus throw a better football. And so, those are going to be all things that are taken into consideration. That's not to scare any Duke fans away. I mean, Malik is obviously a great guy, but like I said, last season we needed 3 quarterbacks, or else we were not gonna field a team, or we were gonna have Donald Tomlin run out there. And so these are all good things, but to see Grayson and Malik's friendship begin to bud was great throughout the spring. And by the time spring ended, those guys were tight, pushing each other, pushing the team to be better.
We saw a blue-white game played on the field for the spring football season, a 21-16 result. And again, we're not going to make any massive takeaways from that level of football. At least it's a little better than what someone like Lane Kiffin in Oxford did when he's got a tug-of-war game or a slam dunk competition taking place in the spring football season with his team. But we saw some form of a game, Josh, which was certainly good. So let's talk a little bit more about the spring season as a whole after we take our final timeout here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Of course, it is the best time of year. It's winner-take-all time in the NBA and NHL. How are you not loving these playoffs? FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Shout out to all of the Caniacs out there. Our Carolina Hurricanes playing a home game tonight at PNC Arena, down 2-0 against the New York Rangers, but plenty of time left in the series and plenty of great lines and odds out there for the game at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 on to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. All right, we move forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. I'm JJ Jackson alongside Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. So the spring season as a whole, if you were to maybe highlight individual players or position group, however you feel comfortable, who was a winner of the spring football season? Or who were winners?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, you have to look at leadership, right? And so I think you saw Jordan Moore take another huge step this time on the leadership side. He's stronger than he ever has been. He is now a bona fide wide receiver one. And so he stood out. Another name to look for is in the wide receiving core is a transfer. Javon Harvey came in from Old Dominion. He will see the field. He will be a kind of a slot guy. He's solid. You can tell he's got experience. So that's just another name to look for. On the offensive line, it's going to be unique. Obviously, the two guys returning that have extended playing time are Brian Parker, Justin Pickett. Matt Craycraft had a pretty good spring, and then you got a whole crop of guys coming in who signed as transfers who just weren't able to be here for spring ball. And so that's going to be interesting. Jeremiah Hazley, incredible spring, great spring. He is, if Duke fans remember, he was a linebacker, and then last year, I believe it was heading into the Clemson game, like first game of the season, they switched him over to tight end, and he played behind Nicky Dalmolin last year. He had a great spring, and then we got the great news after spring ball was over that Nicky Dalmolin is going to return for his graduate season. And so we're going to have that two-headed monster again in the tight end room of Nicky Dalmolin and Jeremiah Hazley. So that's great. So that's kind of on the offensive side. Jacquez Moore leading the running back room with Peyton Jones. We've already talked quarterback. Defensive side of the football, you're going to look at leaders. In the secondary, you've got Jalen Stinson returning. He put his name in the portal, decided to come back. So he and Terry Moore are back there. They're both starters from last season. Chandler Rivers back on the edge, starter from last season. Josh Pickett, I would say a part-time starter from last season, probably a two-deep guy. We'll have that other side. He's bigger, faster, and stronger than he was last year. Cam Bergeron is going to take that Brandon Johnson nickel role. And I'm sure that Duke would not be upset at all to add, another DB and safety from the portal, just being truthful with you.
Yeah.
Trey Freeman, going to be a leader, man. We all know that there in the linebacker room. Interesting. The latest transfer in from Duke is Alex Howard, Youngstown State, transferred to Texas A&M. They were pumped about getting him in College Station, and then he transferred at the end of spring ball to Duke. And so I'm not sure where that'll lead us, but you've got your Nick Morris Jr.'s there, Luke Margot, others, in that linebacker room. But then on the line, I mean, Wes Williams is the big name. Wes is a big boy. Ryan Smith, you just others. Michael Reese is back. I mean, Aaron Hall. So anyway, I believe Duke's fine there. Here's what I think is going to happen, JJ. I believe between now and the end of June, when this kind of portal signing window has come to an end, I believe you're going to see Duke add some depth to these positions. I'm not sure you're going to see Duke add stars to these positions.
Right.
But I believe you're going to see Duke add depth. And I believe that depth is as important or more important sometimes than the star ranking of a transfer. And
no doubt. I mean, you talked about the quarterback position earlier. Duke had 3 quarterbacks last year that had to help them kind of get through the entire course of that season. So any depth is good depth when you're looking at a football team. Because I'm sitting here thinking about, you and I love looking at the scholarship charts that we've done for this basketball team.
Yep.
That would be impossible to kind of keep up with the football program, because man, you need players, and you need to make sure that if someone goes down, the next man is right there ready to step up and keep the thing moving. So last question here as we kind of wrap up our conversation here today, Josh, when you look at the spring football season being over, knowing that Duke has a new coach, they've got a new football schedule, obviously, that's been put out. And as we get closer to the football season, you and I have always done full episodes breaking down the schedule, and we'll be sure to do that again. Did expectations shift at all for what the Duke team can do in the season, or where do they currently sit as you look at Duke football going into 2024?
Yeah, well, number one, I mean, it seems like every year, people either look at Duke's schedule like they did last year, and and say, oh, they're not going to win by so many games. Look at that schedule. Or it's a new coach, Elko. We'll see what this guy's got. I think the over-under Elko's first year was 3.5 wins, and I believe last year was 6.5, and they ended up with 8, and maybe 9 with I think it was 8 total. My expectation, and if I have to be very honest with you, I probably am closer into the football program than I've ever been. Number one, I believe bowling is a non-negotiable. Making that bowl win is a non-negotiable. I do believe the difference between making it to a bowl and competing at the top level of the ACC this year is going to be how Duke fills out these final, let's say, 6 openings that they have for the transfer portal.
Yeah.
I really will. I do believe if those are filled out with the quality guys that are either going to start or be part of that 2-deep active, getting tons of reps, then I think this team can compete at the highest level in the ACC. If for some reason those don't land and we get guys that are not really capable of playing in the 2-deep, I think we could be looking, more at that 7-5, 6-6, get to a bowl game. Which, listen, I'm not too spoiled, as a historically a positive Duke football fan. I'm not mad about those things. I understand the way it works, and I understand what it takes to try to build that program up. And so that's my expectation. I believe if things stayed exactly the way they are right now, it's make a bowl game. I believe if Duke can add 5-6 pieces more from this portal, I could see Duke competing at the highest level.
Tell us about the Section 17 podcast before you get out of here.
Absolutely. We just released our post-spring episode, post-NFL draft episode this past week. And so you can check that out wherever you listen to podcasts. Just look up Section 17 podcast. We're on YouTube as well. You mentioned your YouTube channel. Thanks to all that are watching on YouTube. If you've head over there, Duke Football Talk, Section 17 podcast on YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment, all those things. And then, of course, 5-star ratings and reviews. Those are the absolute best. And so if you give those a here for Locked On, and then also for us, we would appreciate it. We are all on the same team, rooting on and watching and following the same programs. And so I really appreciate all JJ you do here at Locked On Blue Devils.
Likewise. Appreciate you stopping by each and every week, Josh. It's good to see you, and we'll do this again soon, okay?
All right, man. Go Duke.
All right, that's Josh Cox joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and that's going to wrap up our show here today. Once again, please subscribe to that YouTube channel. As Josh just said, subscribe to ours, leave us a 5-star rating and written review on the Apple Podcast platform, and follow us on X at @LO_Blue Devils. More basketball conversations in the days to come. Hopefully we can get another transfer portal guard for John Shire's team. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.